Subscribe to the Tales List channel so you don't miss new tales. My name is Cassandra, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a clinical psychologist in Portland, Oregon. The story I'm about to share is one that tested every boundary I thought I understood about family, loyalty, and the courage it takes to protect what matters most. For nearly a decade, I navigated the complex social dynamics of my husband's prominent family, where appearances mattered more than authenticity and tradition trumped personal happiness. But nothing in my professional training or personal experience could have prepared me for the devastating accusation my sister-in-law hurled across the dinner table during what should have been a celebratory family gathering. The stunned silence that followed her words, the raw pain in my husband's eyes, and the difficult but transformative journey we embarked on afterward, this experience became the catalyst for discovering what family truly means. This is the story of how we lost the family we were born into and found the one we were destined to create, a journey that demanded everything from us but gave us more than we could have imagined. The setting for our unraveling was my in-laws' elegant Mediterranean-style home in the exclusive West Hills neighborhood of Portland. The occasion was my father-in-law's 65th birthday, a formal affair with crystal stemware, hired servers, and conversation that sparkled with surface-level pleasantness while concealing deeper tensions that had simmered for generations. My husband, Alexander, stood beside me, his hand resting gently on the small of my back, our silent signal of solidarity in this environment of subtle judgments and unspoken expectations. Our 7-year-old daughter Chloe was playing quietly in the adjoining living room, her joyful humming drifting through the archway as she built an elaborate castle with her blocks, completely unaware of the storm about to break. The disruption began with Alexander's sister, Victoria, who had been consuming champagne at an alarming rate throughout the evening, her voice growing increasingly sharp and carrying across the dining room as she held forth about her latest financial struggles. Victoria's eyes repeatedly flicked toward Alexander as she spoke, a not-so-subtle reminder that he was the successful brother who had built a thriving biotechnology firm from the ground up through sheer determination and intelligence, unlike her own husband, who relied on family connections. The tension in the room was palpable, a familiar undercurrent at these family gatherings, but tonight it felt different, sharper, more volatile, like a gathering storm preparing to unleash its fury upon everyone in its path. I found myself holding my breath without realizing it, my professional training kicking in as I observed the delicate dance of family dynamics playing out before me. Recognizing the warning signs of an impending explosion, but feeling powerless to prevent it, in this charged environment where I was both participant and observer, family member and outsider. The trigger moment arrived wrapped in pure innocence, as such moments often do. Chloe came skipping into the dining room, her face radiant with excitement and completely unaware of the tension she was entering. "Gaddy, look what I made for Grandpa!" she exclaimed, holding up a carefully crafted birthday card featuring a colorful drawing of our family with bright, cheerful strokes that captured our essence perfectly. Alexander's face softened immediately, the professional demeanor he maintained around his family melting away into genuine paternal warmth that transformed his entire presence. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice filled with unmistakable love that seemed to push back against the room's stiffness. That's when Victoria released a sharp, derisive laugh that sliced through the moment's tenderness like a shard of broken glass, her eyes glinting with something dangerous as she set down her champagne flute with a definitive click. "How utterly precious," Victoria sneered, her words slurring slightly but carrying clearly in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the table. "It's just so fascinating how Chloe looks exactly like Cassandra. Those dark curls, that smile, those distinctive dimples. There's absolutely nothing of you in her, Alexander. It's almost as if she's not even biologically yours." The room plunged into profound silence, so complete that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Forks froze midway to mouths, wine glasses hovered in midair, and breath caught in throats throughout the spacious dining room. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration, delivered with calculated cruelty that hung in the air like poison. I felt the blood drain from my face, my professional composure shattering under the weight of the violation, my mind racing as I tried to comprehend how we had arrived at this unimaginable moment in what should have been a celebration. Alexander slowly placed his linen napkin on the table, the movement deliberate and controlled, in a way that was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. His voice, when it finally came, was dangerously quiet, each word measured and precise. "What did you just say about my daughter?" Victoria, emboldened by alcohol and years of simmering resentment that had clearly been festering beneath her polished surface, didn't retreat. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she doubled down on her cruelty. "You heard me perfectly, Alexander. Look at her. She's Cassandra replicated. There isn't a single trace of our family in her features. Don't you find that statistically remarkable?" Before I could form any words in our defense, my mind still reeling from the shock of the accusation, Alexander stood, his chair scraping against the polished hardwood, with a sound that echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. "You will never speak about my child that way again," he stated, each word measured and cold as ice, his eyes locked on his sister with an intensity I had never seen before. "You will never question my wife's integrity in my presence. We're leaving." He turned toward our confused daughter, his expression shifting instantly from cold fury to protective tenderness, a transformation so complete it nearly brought tears to my eyes. "Chloe, sweetheart, please get your coat. We're going home." The look of bewildered hurt on our daughter's face, as she tried to process why we were leaving so suddenly, would be forever etched in my memory, a haunting reminder of the moment our family fractured and everything changed in an instant. I moved automatically, gathering our things with trembling hands, my mind still struggling to catch up with the devastating turn the evening had taken. The car ride home unfolded in heavy silence, broken only by Chloe's soft sniffles from the back seat, before she eventually succumbed to exhausted sleep, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle against the window. The streetlights cast shifting patterns across Alexander's face as he drove, revealing the storm of emotions he was working to contain beneath his calm exterior. I reached across the console and placed my hand on his arm, feeling the tense muscles beneath his dress shirt, needing the physical connection as much as I wanted to offer comfort. "Alexander," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears that threatened to overwhelm me. "You know that isn't true, right? You know she's—" He gently interrupted me, his eyes remaining fixed on the rain-slicked road ahead, his knuckles white where they gripped the steering wheel. "I have never for a single second doubted that Chloe is my daughter, Cassandra," he said, his voice low but firm, leaving no room for uncertainty. "What I doubt is my sister's humanity and my parents' complicity through their silence." His unwavering faith provided a lifeline in my rising sea of panic and fury, anchoring me when I felt myself beginning to spiral into what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. That night we tucked Chloe into bed together, watching her sleep as if our combined vigilance could shield her from the world's cruelty, the weight of what had transpired settling heavily upon us in the quiet of her bedroom. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, my heart aching with a protective ferocity that surprised me with its intensity, wondering how we would navigate the aftermath of this earthquake that had shaken our family's foundation. The next morning, Alexander transformed into a man with a mission, moving with a purpose I hadn't seen in years. He didn't go to his downtown office as usual, nor did he take the expected calls from business partners or clients. Instead, he stationed himself at his home office desk, his expression grim with determination, as he powered up his computer and organized his files with motory precision. The first calls were to his financial advisor and accountant, conversations conducted in low, serious tones behind the closed door of his study. For years, He had served as the family's unofficial financial safety net, supporting his parents' lavish lifestyle, providing loans to Victoria that were never repaid, covering property taxes and private school tuition for his nieces, without expectation of reimbursement or even gratitude. One by one, with methodical precision that spoke to his resolve, he severed these financial ties that had bound us to his family for nearly a decade. He closed the joint account his parents used for emergencies that somehow occurred with predictable regularity, halted all automatic monthly transfers that had been draining our resources, and formally called in all outstanding debts through official channels that left no room for negotiation or emotional manipulation. He was performing radical surgery on our financial entanglements, cutting away the cancerous dependencies that had enabled toxic behavior for years, recognizing that money had become the currency of control in his family dynamics. It was a cold, clinical, necessary amputation, executed with stunning efficiency, and though I knew it was the right decision, I couldn't help the pang of anxiety that shot through me as I considered the repercussions we would inevitably face. The backlash arrived swiftly and viciously, exactly as we had anticipated, but still shocking in its intensity. Alexander's phone became an instrument of guilt and manipulation, vibrating incessantly with calls from numbers we recognized all too well. First came his mother's call, her voice trembling with theatrical tears as she pleaded for him to be the bigger person and not destroy the family over a misunderstanding, her words carefully crafted to minimize Victoria's cruelty while maximizing his sense of obligation. Next came his father, voice booming with patriarchal disappointment, demanding he remember his responsibilities as the eldest son and invoking family legacy and honor as if these concepts could erase the damage that had been done. Finally, Victoria called, screaming accusations, labeling him a heartless monster for punishing the entire family for what she dismissively termed a little comment. Alexander listened to each tirade on speakerphone, his expression never wavering from its determined calm, his posture straight and unwavering as he absorbed their anger and manipulation without response until they had exhausted their arguments. When each caller finally fell silent, waiting for his capitulation, he delivered the same measured, final verdict. The topic of my wife and daughter is permanently closed. All financial support is irrevocably withdrawn. Do not contact me again unless it is to offer a genuine, unqualified apology to Cassandra and Chloe. Then he would terminate the call without further discussion, leaving no room for negotiation or emotional blackmail. He was constructing an impenetrable fortress around our family, its walls built from sheer, unbreakable resolve, and watching him protect us with such fierce determination filled me with a love deeper than I had ever known. The most challenging aspect in the days that followed became protecting Chloe from the escalating fallout while helping her process the sudden disappearance of family members who had been constants in her life. She began asking difficult questions that twisted my heart with their innocent confusion. Why is Grandma crying when she calls? Why can't we visit Aunt Victoria's house anymore? Did I do something wrong at the party? We made a conscious decision to practice age-appropriate honesty, recognizing that vague answers would only feed her anxiety and confusion. We sat her down together in the living room, creating a safe space where she could express her feelings without judgment, and explain that sometimes adults say hurtful things that aren't true, and when that happens, it's healthy to create distance to protect your heart. We reaffirmed that her daddy and I loved her more than anything in the world, and that she was, without any doubt, our cherished daughter, who had brought more joy into our lives than we could ever express. We emphasized that our family was built on love and trust, not on DNA or cruel words meant to cause pain. Watching her process this information, witnessing her understanding that our love constituted her unshakable truth, became a profoundly healing moment for all three of us. The first step toward reclaiming our peace and establishing our identity as a family unit separate from the toxic dynamics that had previously constrained us. In her simple acceptance of our love as her anchor, I found the strength to stop questioning myself and start looking forward. In the subsequent weeks, the silence from his family felt deafening initially, the absence of their constant demands and criticisms, creating a void we had to learn to navigate, but we gradually learned to cherish it as the gift it was. The constant, low-grade stress of family obligations and financial demands evaporated, leaving behind a quiet we hadn't realized we were craving. The atmosphere in our home transformed, becoming palpably lighter and more peaceful, as if we had been living with background noise for years and had only just discovered the beauty of silence. Alexander, liberated from the burden of being the family financier and peacekeeper, seemed to physically stand taller, the perpetual tension in his shoulders finally easing, his smiles coming more readily and genuinely. We established new family traditions that reflected who we truly were, rather than who we were expected to be. Friday game nights with ridiculous prizes, Saturday morning pancake breakfasts with chocolate chips and laughter, Sunday afternoon hikes in the nearby forests, where we could breathe deeply and reconnect with nature and each other. We were rediscovering each other, without the toxic shadow of his extended family darkening our lives, learning about preferences and passions we had suppressed to maintain peace in the larger family dynamic. One evening, Alexander looked at me across the dinner table, his eyes clear and focused in a way I hadn't seen in years, and said quietly, "I should have done this years ago. I was so busy trying to be a good son that I was neglecting what it means to be a good husband and father." His words filled cracks in my soul I hadn't even recognized were there, healing wounds I had learned to ignore. Our healing journey proved non-linear, marked by unexpected challenges and emotional setbacks that tested our resolve and our new boundaries. Alexander experienced waves of profound sadness, grieving the family he had always hoped they could become, mourning the loss of relationships that had never truly existed outside his optimistic imagination. I battled surges of anger that surfaced at unpredictable moments, while driving to work, folding laundry, watching Chloe sleep, a hot, sharp fury at the violation targeted at our innocent child and the years we had wasted trying to meet impossible expectations. We recognized we needed professional guidance to navigate this complex emotional landscape and sought out a therapist specializing in family trauma and boundary setting. In that safe, neutral space, we learned to articulate our pain, fears, and hopes with clarity we hadn't managed alone, giving voice to emotions we had suppressed for the sake of family harmony. We came to understand that the disastrous dinner wasn't the cause of our rupture, but merely the symptom of a deep, outless, so festering sickness within his family system, a sickness we could no longer afford to accommodate if we wanted to protect our own family's health and happiness. Therapy provided us the vocabulary for our pain and the practical tools to construct something new and beautiful from the wreckage of our former relationships, transforming our anger into action and our grief into growth. We began implementing strategies to maintain our boundaries while managing the guilt that occasionally resurfaced, recognizing it as a conditioned response rather than a moral imperative. Approximately 6 months into our new chapter, a formal letter arrived from Alexander's parents, its heavy cream stationery and formal typeface signaling the importance they placed on this communication. Its tone differed markedly from their previous communications, not demanding or accusatory, but requesting, almost pleading in its formality. They asked if we would consider meeting them, just the three of us adults, at a neutral location downtown, suggesting a quiet restaurant they knew we liked. They wrote that they missed us and, more significantly, they missed Chloe, acknowledging her absence in their lives in a way they never had before. They acknowledged, for the first time in writing, that Victoria's words had been unacceptable and hurtful, though they carefully avoided directly condemning her behavior or examining their own complicity in the family dynamic that had enabled it. Alexander approached the possibility with understandable hesitation, his protective instincts immediately flaring at the thought of re-engaging with the people who had caused so much pain. We discussed the potential meeting extensively over several days, carefully weighing the risk of renewed pain and manipulation against the fragile possibility of reconciliation, considering what we would gain versus what we might lose by opening this door. After thorough consideration, examining the decision from every possible angle, we decided we would meet them once, establishing clearly defined boundaries beforehand, and maintaining zero expectations about the outcome, preparing ourselves emotionally for whatever might transpire, while reaffirming our commitment to protecting the peace we had worked so hard to build. The meeting at the quiet, upscale cafe felt stiff and awkward initially, the air thick with unspoken history and the weight of months of separation. His parents appeared older, the strain of our estrangement visibly etched on their faces in new lines, and a certain weariness around their eyes that hadn't been there before. Our initial conversation stumbled through hollow pleasantries and superficial topics: the weather, local news, anything to avoid addressing the elephant in the room that dominated the space between us. Then his mother looked directly at Alexander, her eyes glistening with unshed tears that seemed genuine rather than performative, and said, "We were wrong," her voice trembling with uncharacteristic vulnerability that caught me off guard. "We remained silent when we should have spoken up immediately," she continued, her hands shaking slightly as she clutched her water glass. "We allowed Victoria's bitterness to poison everything. We took your generous support for granted, Alexander, and we completely failed to protect your family when it mattered most. It wasn't a perfect apology, it still partially deflected blame onto bitterness. Rather than fully acknowledging their complicity or examining the family system that had nurtured such toxicity, but it represented a beginning, a crack in the formidable wall between us that I hadn't believed possible." Alexander listened intently, his expression remaining guarded but open, before responding with simple dignity. "Thank you for saying that." We left the cafe that afternoon without making specific promises about the future, but with a slight, cautious lightening of the heavy weight we'd been carrying, a tentative thread of connection that we could choose to strengthen or release. Reconciliation, if it could be called that, evolved into a slow, cautious process governed by strict boundaries we established and maintained without compromise. Victoria remained completely excluded from our lives, a non-negotiable condition that we reinforced whenever his parents attempted to mediate or minimize her behavior. Our interactions with his parents became limited, carefully supervised, and occurred exclusively on our terms in neutral spaces where we could leave if boundaries were tested. They saw Chloe occasionally, but the family dynamic had permanently shifted. They were grandparents now, not authority figures whose approval we sought or whose disapproval we feared. Alexander's relationship with them settled into a cordial but distant connection, and the financial separation remained absolute, a boundary we never considered crossing. Subscribe to the Tales List channel so you don't miss new tales. The peace we found through this difficult journey is neither fragile nor borrowed. It's sturdy, earned, and authentically ours, built on the foundation of difficult choices and unwavering commitment to protecting what matters most. The process taught us that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by mutual respect, emotional safety, and the courage to set boundaries even when it costs us relationships we once valued. Our story continues to unfold, but now we write it together, on our own terms, with the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to say no to toxicity, and yes, to your own well-being. Thank you for listening to our story.